Hello, everybody. Welcome to this new monthly meeting episode for Kubewarden, monthly community meeting. Yeah, you can see nowadays it's a bit darker for some of us and a bit brighter for others. I suppose we have winter evenings for some of us, summer mornings for others, winter mornings for others, and so on. Today, I think we don't have anybody with winter mornings, though. But yeah. So yeah, welcome. I'm Victor Cuadrado, I'm one of the developers of Kubewarden, and we have here developer people from Kubewarden and others. And I'm going to be your host for today's call. And maybe we can do some presentations. We have Fabrizio.
Hey, hi, I am Fabrizio. I've joined the Kubewarden team in September, so I'm pretty new. And yeah, that's it. I enjoy coding most of my time and playing golf. So that's it.
Is it the first time that we have you on the call? You have been here for
I've been
months,
here
but
for a
maybe.
couple of times, I guess, or
Okay.
just one. Yeah.
And then, yeah,
So
we have also the usual subjects. We have Flavio, for example.
Yeah, hi everybody. Flavio, one of the creators of Kubewarden. Happy to be here as usual.
And then we have Jordan, that would present things from the rancher side, downstream of Kubewarden.
Hello, Jordan. I'm one of the UI developers on Kubewarden.
And then we have Jose also from the team, developer.
Yeah, hello. Kubewarden developer here as well.
One of those summer mornings, lucky guy. Anyway, we have Martin also.
Yeah, hello. I'm doing testing of a Kubewarden, making sure it works.
And we have John also with us in the call.
Hi, I'm working on the docs. Hi, everyone.
And I think from the side of Q, I think that's everybody. So yeah, let's see the what we have in the agenda. Let me just share the screen super fast. Okay, we should be seeing now the office hours as usual. No, now we should be seeing them if I click. Yes, as usual, these office hours are open to the public. If you from the community would like to add anything here and come present or talk about things, just feel free. So for today, it is 16th of November, and yeah, we have Kubewarden 1.9 that got released. It was released just before KubeCon North America. So for those that were there, I hope that you're enjoying the hangover from KubeCon, the nerdy hangover, not like, from drinks or whatever. And for us also, we had for some of us, which are SUSE employees, we had a Hack Week, which is unrelated, but yeah. And we also had this week a release of the Kubewarden UI, which is the 1.3 that was spearheaded by Jordan and Martin. So it was a nice thing to see coming up today. Okay, so I suppose, shall we start with Kubewarden 1.9? We have here that it has the new raw policies support, a new feature, and also as a new feature, the Rego context-aware policies. So about the raw policies, I think Fabrizio, would be, yeah.
yeah,
Would you like to give us a little overview?
Yeah, I have little slides and also little demo. Okay, I'm gonna share
perfect.
my screen. Okay, you should see my screen right now. If not, please speak up.
Yeah, now it's perfect. Yeah.
Okay, so as you said before, Victor, Kubewarden 1.9.0 was released during the KubeCon Chicago, and we have upcoming features which are like other context-aware capabilities to Rego policies. I don't know, maybe Flavio wants to elaborate later. And the raw non-Kubernetes policies. The cool thing about those two features is that they were both requested by the community through GitHub in this case, but we are trying to prioritize community-related work or feature requested by the community or feedbacks that we got from the community. So, well, exciting times, and also exciting to see what people are doing with Kubewarden. And what are row policies? A row policy is basically a way to use Kubewarden as a generic policy evaluation engine. And it allows basically three things. Well, the first thing is like we needed to allow for the policy server to be deployed outside the Kubernetes, because some users could be interested in not having to deploy a policy server through our controller, and then use the policy server as like a daemon or inside a container, some standard REST API server, and but also row policies can run inside the Kubernetes if a user wants to deploy the policy server inside Kubernetes without our controller. And basically, row policies are some policies that can be evaluated against non-Kubernetes objects and resources. So the user is free to send its own payload or its own shape of payload to the policy, and some things we think that they could be useful for are, for instance, analyzing test coverage outputs, analyzing static analysis files, Terraform plans, or also like being used in microservices architecture. So let's say you have like a microservice application, which is an e-commerce, and you want to validate that certain user can do certain actions. For instance, certain users cannot delete products, or like some back office users could, have some policies. You could still use Kubewarden as your only policy engine, also for like domain related policing, let's say. And I've prepared a little demo, which is inspired by something that you can find on the OPA tutorial, which is basically an example on how to use OPA to analyze a Terraform plan, or better, the complexity of it. And so we have an OPA policy that runs in Kubewarden that can compute a score for a Terraform plan. And this score, the policies returns accept if the score which is computed is below a threshold, which a user can decide through the settings, can set through the settings. And otherwise, if the score of the plan is above the threshold, the policy, the request will be rejected. And we calculate the threshold by looking at number of deletions, creations, and modification of certain resource type. It could be extended to basically every resource type that is created on Terraform, but for simplicity, we choose like 3 or 4. The resources score are weighted, so there are some resources that weight more than others if they are created or deleted. For instance, if you add an AWS autoscaling group or delete that, then it adds has a weight which is bigger than, for instance, deleting just an AWS instance. And the policy, okay, I said that, it raises the plan if the score is below a threshold, and also if there are no changes made to any YAM resources. Okay, I will show the demo. So for this policy, we are using 2 plans. One is this. If you're familiar with Terraform, and even if you're not, this is a very simple plan, because it just creates like an instance, an autoscaling group, and a launch configuration. So we expect this plan to be valid for our policy. And this one is a little bit more complicated, because we are creating like an autoscaling group an AWS instance, other autoscaling groups, and this could be, too complex to be applied. And yeah, looking at the README file, you can see that the policy accepts a request in like a JSON format, and this JSON format is free. So, well, in this case, it's not because the user has put the effort of adding its own marshalling of the request inside the policy and its own logic, of course, the validation logic. And to create the JSON, we just convert it through Terraform a CLI tool, which can output a binary, and then you can also convert the binary to a JSON plan. So the request would be basically the JSON plan.
So then, Fabrizio, if I may,
Yes.
just so I understand it more clearer. So then policies accept the raw policies, accept JSONs, no, with this specific schema, so to speak, no, the request and the settings, and then we'll return another JSON saying if they accept or not.
Yes, and now we'll see it in action, and we'll see how the thing works basically. As you said, it returns a JSON because we added an endpoint to the policy server, and this endpoint is called validate row. So you would just, to use the endpoint, you would just send a request to the validate row endpoint of the policy server, and you will get a response which is similar to what you would get if you were using the Kubernetes validate, standard validate API endpoint by hand, but with the Kubernetes information stripped down. So I will show you in action with Postman. So here we have like a valid plan. It's a bit noisy, so it's hard to understand, but you can believe me, this is like the valid one. So the one which we produced by using this TF plan TF. And you see that the response is allowed and it's a 200 OK. And we have the TF plan invalid, which is the biggest, the large one. And this one will be rejected with the message that the score 31 is greater than the threshold we put in the settings. Okay. So, so to make it like short, a user can define its own policies, write its own policies, and use its own structs or queries, JSON queries against a JSON which is free form. And then it can leverage the Kubewarden policy server by using the validate row REST API to have the policy evaluate these JSONs against the validation logic that he wrote in the policy. So yeah, that's basically it.
Well, basically, I mean, I think it's quite cool, to be honest, no? To be able to just use the policy server of Kubewarden to run whatever policy against a JSON that is somehow not related to Kubernetes. So questions. Then one hits the validate raw endpoint instead of the normal validate one. Is there any tracing and monitoring set up for that endpoint?
Yes, of course. We have the same. The same. We have tracing and metrics as we have for the endpoint that we use for validating admission reviews from Kubernetes. So you can leverage still like all the OpenTelemetry and Prometheus and Jaeger setup that we already have in place for Kubewarden, Kubernetes policies Kubewarden, also for the raw policies. I think this is like a big win for the users. And so the thing is like we are curious to see how the user would use this raw policy, because it really opens a world of possibility. So if you are looking watching this registration, this YouTube video, then let us know how you would use the feature. If you guys have other questions.
I have one. I'm wondering, I mean, maybe I know the answer, but maybe it's a good thing to explain. So one can not use the policy server for hitting this endpoint of validate row, but can it be the policy server included? Can it be one of the policy servers that are already in the cluster managed by the Kubewarden controller, or should one not use it yet? That way.
So at the moment we do not support that, and the reason is like if you change the config map, our controller will try to basically reconcile the config back to the original to the desired state. So for using row policies, we suggest you to deploy another policy server outside the controller, so not managed by the controller itself. And that can be done by just following our tutorial. Maybe we can post a link in the chat later. So you just follow the tutorial. There are several ways to run the policy server inside the cluster or outside the cluster. If, for instance, you just want to run inside a container, and then you can hit the row policy, row validate endpoint and make use of the row policies.
Thanks. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have also another question. So this is a policy that is doing validation. Would it be possible to also perform mutation?
Yeah, of course, we support mutation with the user suspects, which are policies written in Go, WAPC, so by compiling in TinyGo. And and Rust policies, of course, WASI policies, and I guess that's all. And we support mutation. A user can write its own policies. It's basically writing in the same way that, like, by using the SDK, the Kubewarden SDK, that you will write a Kubernetes policy, with the exception that you need to unmarshal the payload by yourself by using a supporting struct that it matches the shape of your payload. But as for the rest, it stays like it's written as a normal policy. So
and I guess the response message would look like the one that is usually sent back to Kubernetes, meaning that there is a JSON patch inside of the response. Okay.
Yes, there is a JSON patch, and
it is calculated by us. It's not up to the user to do that. Yeah.
Yes, and then the user could use the JSON patch, like either decode it and get the patch in a JSON format, or use some JSON patcher library to apply that to the mutated object, to the original object to mutate it. So it will be the same, except the response will not have Kubernetes decoration, let's say.
Oh, thanks.
Yep, many thanks. Okay, and that's only half of what, well, a part of what went out in Kubewarden 1.9. Another part is the Rego context-aware policies, no? Flavio?
Yes, I can talk about that. Let me share my screen. Can you see that?
Yep, we see the terminal.
Yeah, so, let me move it away. Okay, so in the beginning, the context-aware policies are policies that at evaluation time, they can also use information about the Kubernetes cluster. So, for example, they could ask about what are the config maps that are defined inside of a certain namespace. Get me this config map that maybe is referenced by the request which is being processed, and based on the contents of the config map, then take a decision about accept, reject, or mutate, the usual thing. Since the beginning, this was a feature made available only to policies written using WAPC, but there was a request from the community about extending the support for Rego policies that we have, so that context-aware Rego policies could be written. So there is a precise, let's say, methodology to write Rego policies that access information from the Kubernetes cluster. So we support both the gatekeeper way of accessing cluster information, and let's say the vanilla OPA way, which would be the one done by the kube management controller of OPA. I don't know how many people are using it, but we do support that as well. Now, the key point is in both cases, for the Rego policy, everything is seamless. The policy does not have to be rewritten in order to be used inside of Kubewarden, and that has always been the case, and it still is the case even if your policy is using context-aware data. So no need to rewrite anything. And as a proof of that, we have this policy, which is basically looking into ingress object creation. And every time there is a new ingress that is about to be created, it looks at the other ingress objects that are already defined inside of the cluster, and make sure that there are no conflicts between the ingress object that is about to be created and the other ones that are already there. This is the typical context-aware policy. And as a matter of fact, if you go into the Gatekeeper website and look at the library of Gatekeeper policies, you will find exactly this policy. So the policy is this one, which is taken from this URL. This file is really a copy and paste of what you find over this URL. And the policy is looking into the kind of a review object, making sure it's an ingress one, and then making sure that it is part of the networking, Kubernetes IO as group, a bunch of checks. The most important one is down there, is making sure that inside of the rules section there are no overlaps between an ingress that is already been defined and another one that and the other one which is about to be created. Inside of Gatekeeper, you have this special variable called data that has inside of it a key called inventory, and then there is a really specific way that to organize all the information coming from the Kubernetes cluster. So Kubewarden, when evaluating your policy, make sure that the data inventory is populated in the very same way that Gatekeeper does, and which means that you don't have to change your policy. So now we have some test data. We have some unit tests actually. So as always, you can write unit tests using Rego itself. So here you have a unit test about this is a unique ingress object that is about to be created. And this is instead something that is we consider a duplicate, and these are the contents of inventory. So when you're running the unit test of Rego, you basically say, okay, run the function, the policy, and the preload put inside of data inventory. The inventory I just defined it over there. This is really traditional Rego code. Now, if I go here and I run the Rego test, everything is passing, everything is green. Now we want to compile this policy into WebAssembly so that we can use that inside of Kubewarden. This is a project created with our template, which provides a makefile with a bunch of targets that are specific to to this process, like here compiling the WebAssembly module using the OPA tool, and doing some other things like artifact tab integration if you want, and really important, annotating the policy. Why is that so important? Because inside of the policy metadata, like with all kind of Kubewarden policies, the policy author specifies what are the resources that are relevant to this policy, what kind of events is this policy interested about, whether this is a policy which is mutating or not. And now, this is the same way that is used for WAPC policies. If you have a Rego policy that needs to access cluster data, the policy author has to indicate that inside of the policy metadata, and he has to inform the administrator, whoever is going to deploy this policy, about what kind of resources have to be accessed by the policy. Now, a peculiarity of Kubewarden is that whenever a context-aware tries to access some data at runtime, we validate, we make sure that the data that the policy is trying to access is in fact has been allowed it. The administrator who deployed the policy granted access to like ingresses to this policy. Basically, okay.
Yeah, this sounds nice. So this sounds like more fine-grained, no, than the approach that maybe other Rego policy engines do.
Yes, exactly. Because with the approaches by the other Rego engines, you have to define at a global level all the types of resources that have to be shared to the policies. So if you have a policy that requires access to ingress, then all the other policies that are loaded by this server, they all have the inventory filled with the data about ingresses. Here in our case, instead, the inventory is filled only with the data that the administrator allowed the policy to access. So now I can show you how everything works. So now we're going to build the annotated policy. Well, it is already there, but okay. Okay. Now everything is there. If we do a kubectl inspect of the annotated policy, we get all the information about how the policy has to be used, the kind of settings that it has, and then it also tells us, look, this policy is going to access these resources. All right. And so now, when you deploy the policy as an administrator inside of the Kubewarden custom resource definition, you have to grant access to these resources. Another nice thing is that we have this tool that I guess you're already familiar with, which is kwctl, which allow you to also run the policies to test them outside of Kubernetes. Since the introduction of context-aware policy, we also have a way to run context-aware policy and basically use like pre-recorded data of interaction between a policy and the Kubernetes cluster. This is pretty nice and useful because it allows you to run, to test policies without having a connection with a Kubernetes cluster. And it also allows you to basically reproduce a kind of corner cases about things that are not working as expected. And so let me show you how this works. If we run the test now, the end-to-end test, you see that everything is running and all the tests have been they passed. Now looking into how the tests are run, we can see here, as you can see today, people decided to use my office. I was in a meeting, but yeah, okay, that's the beauty of it.
Exactly.
So here, running the policy. So what we do here is, as always, we have to say, okay, this is the fake request, pre-recorded request about an object that has to be evaluated. Given that this policy is a context-aware one, we are going to allow this policy to interact with the Kubernetes cluster. But instead of interacting with a real Kubernetes cluster, we're going to use this pre-recorded session that happened some time ago. And the pre-recorded session is located over there. Now, just for you to better understand how this thing looks like, this is a YAML file. Now ignore the highlighting errors. And basically here you see what kind of the kind of flow that happens. So first of all, there was a request to list all the type of all resources of a certain type. The type was networking and the kind was ingress. There was no label selector, no field selector, and this is response. The response was a success, meaning that the communication between the policy server and the Kubernetes API worked fine. And this is the response payload that came from it. And as you can see, this is basically like when you do kubectl get ingresses minus output JSON, this is the output you would get. And so if you want to basically create corner cases, you can go in there and replace that so that you can test any kind of scenarios like no ingresses exist, one ingress exists and it's a duplicate, or two ingresses exist but none of them is a duplicate. So you can test it in this way. And by the way, you can also have kwctl run generate this recording session for you. Maybe if you're interested, we can show that another time. But yeah, basically, this is it. The thing is, to summarize, context-aware policies written in Rego are now possible. They do not require you to rewrite your Rego policies. And the way they integrate into the Kubewarden ecosystem is the very same way as all the other types of policies that are context-aware, which right now are just WAPC. And Rego WASI policies are not context-aware, but we could make them context-aware as well, based on the changes that we had to do for Rego. So if you're interested about that, feel free to reach out so that we can schedule this work. That's
Super
it.
Nice. Any questions from the audience? I maybe have one. Well, it's maybe a reminder. So I realized, and also for Fabrizio, so you have showcased here this unique ingress policy example. Is this already published publicly somewhere where one can just use it?
Yes, it's on Artifact Hub. Now let me show that.
So then it's like the full policy. No, it's a copy paste of the context-aware part from the Rego policy, but the rest of usage.
You can install it as always. And what is interesting, it's in the same way as with all our policies. You can also let me pull it down.
It was already, yep.
This is basically the scaffolding of a class or mission policy definition. And here you can see that there was a warning message printed because let me remove less. So this is a policy that requires access to Kubernetes resources at evaluation time. And for safety reason, because we basically scaffolded a cluster admission policy that does not have context-aware resources. So that means that it will not be able to access any kind of Kubernetes resource. If it will try to do that, we will log an error, and the admin will be notified about that. You can run the scaffold as printed here using the allow context-aware flag. Let's try to do that. Now, here we have a context-aware resources section, which is generated by looking into the policy metadata. We still print some warnings because basically here we just trust what the policy author said about his policy. The policy author said this policy, which is about ingresses, it requires to read all the ingress objects that are defined inside of a cluster. That sounds good to me, sounds reasonable, you know, but as always, you have to review what is generated because, you know, if let's assume that this policy is requesting access not only to ingresses, but also to secrets, that means something fishy is going on. And so you should probably, you know, take a look at what the policy is doing and, you know, make sure that access to secret is really, really allowed. It is really, really requested. So, yeah.
Sounds good. Nice feature, to be honest. And yeah, this is for maybe Fabrizio. So Fabrizio, you showcased a raw policy example. I suppose we also have some policy examples, no, for raw policies.
Yeah, we don't have this one in particular, but I can add it to the Kubewarden organization as well. But as for example on how to write raw policies, both validating and mutating in Rego, so OPA and Golang and Rust. You could check our organization's repositories, and we call them test policies. So there are few examples on how to write both validating and mutating policy in all the languages that I mentioned.
Will they be named raw inside of a name or?
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe we can add a label on GitHub to better identify them. Like, you know, all these labels, we could have one for raw policies and tag them accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a way, but yeah, okay.
Anyway, thanks for showcasing the list of policies. Okay, so let's move forward then. Last but not least, we have Jordan, which is going to present the new Rancher UI consuming Kubewarden. So Jordan, up to you.
Oh, thank you, Victor. Now let me find my desktop. Okay, you should be able to see my browser now.
Perfect.
Okay, great. So if you have been on the community meeting before, you may have seen a little bit of a preview to this, but recently we did just release the Kubewarden UI 1.3, and you can find all the release information here from the Kubewarden UI repo, and you can consume this Helm chart from this great URL here, or you could also just use the UI plugin charts from Rancher. Just keep in mind, this is a UI extension for the Rancher Manager. So some of the things that we've added are mainly towards the tracing checklist installation and metrics installation, also having a checklist, policy reports or compliance reports, as we're going to refer to them in Rancher. So I will start with the tracing and metrics installation. So if I go into the detail view of a policy server I have here, this is just a basic policy server that isn't doing anything. It will have these tracing and metrics tabs here. And now, instead of just showing a banner telling you that you don't have it installed, now we have a great checklist to actually show you what needs to happen. So in order to have tracing, you need to have a telemetry operator, has some documentation links here. They'll show you exactly what you need to do. Same goes for Jaeger. This just links to the documentation again, but mainly to tracing. And then you would need to enable and configure your Kubewarden controller chart. And this will just lead you straight to the chart. And for metrics, it's about the same steps, but we actually use the Rancher monitoring Helm chart as our monitoring stack, which this includes Prometheus and Grafana. So you don't have to install those yourself. But what this checklist will do, it will make sure that the Rancher monitoring app is installed and it's configured correctly. Then it will add the Grafana dashboards that Kubewarden team has provided. And once that's set up, the Kubewarden controller must also be configured to enable metrics. And this edit config, once all these prerequisites have been met, this will be able to be clicked, and this will just bring you to the chart installation page. But to spare you the great boring details of installation and configuration, I've already done that on another cluster. So we'll go over here to this cluster, go to a new policy server, and marvel at my server's speed. And go into the detail view here. And you can see I already have 117 policy validations coming from tracing, and we have our tracing tab is populated with a lot of empty things, which is not the best, but nonetheless, you still get the traces. Here we can see, well, this is a good one. Mandatory annotation was missing in this namespace. And see if I go to the metrics tab, now we no longer see the checklist, and we actually get a view into Grafana, which shows this metrics dashboard that Kubewarden team has made with a number of different metrics to consume. And that's mostly it for the metrics and tracing. But one of the other things with Kubewarden, I think it was 1.7 or 1.8, we added the policy reporter, which gives us the audit scanner ability for policy server, and this comes with compliance reports. So here in the main navigation, we have the policy reporter side menu item, which is actually just loading the Kyverno policy reporter. And this gives you a lot of information on compliance reports. So if it's an info severity, you know, this was a monitor policy, so it would have failed, but it hasn't, thankfully. And you get some passes down here. But what's really nice about this release is that we've also added these compliance reports to different sections of the UI itself. So not only within the Kubewarden extension view, I've added these to a lot of resources. So for instance, if I go to the projects and namespaces, you'll see we have a new column in here for namespaces, and it has some compliance reports already. So for this test namespace, we have 11 failures, 16 passes, 1 skip. And if I go straight into this namespace, we'll get a bit more information as to what those were, because now there is another tab that will actually show these compliance reports. You can see a pod would have failed. It was a severity of info, so it's monitor, and then run as non-root should be set to true. What's very nice from this namespace view, you can actually go straight to either the resource that was triggered for this scan, or the policy that the scan is running the rules set against. So if I go into the resource itself, you'll see the compliance tab is here. This pod has actually had a number of different compliance reports, and it would have failed for run as non-root. It would have failed for privilege escalation, but it passed for these other ones. Luckily, these are all info. But it's not only related to pods. I mean, this can go, I think, in all of the workloads. We have this compliance report data. We have these in cron jobs, daemon sets, jobs, even services. I think I may have had, I haven't created a service that failed, but if they were here, that's where it'd show up. And I think that is mainly it for the big ticket items of 1.3, along with a number of bug fixes and such, but that's essentially it. Is there any questions?
Quite sweet, to be honest. Before the questions, I have to say it's quite sweet to see this. No, I mean, it's a nice way to showcase Kubewarden and just have it way nicely. Yeah.
I think it's nice because now you don't have to go into Kubewarden to see what's going on. A lot of administrators just want to you know, go to deployments, go to their namespace, see what actually happened, and you get a view right up front, say, oh, this has failed, that's something's not going right. So
I suppose, question, I suppose this is the compliance column is going to be there. So if you are a persona that it's just caring about one namespace or whatever, you can see the compliance of your namespace, no? And maybe you cannot change the policies because you don't have permissions to deploy or change the policies, but you can still follow up, no, with your state.
yeah, absolutely. You would be able to see what policies actually rejected things, but you wouldn't be able to click into it. These links are not clickable at that point if you don't have access. So you can talk to your administrator, say, hey, this policy is failing this deployment. Can you fix that? Or whatever issue you run into. And I believe these compliance columns will only show up if you have access to the actual resource itself. So that is a number of other things.
Okay, sweet. As you were saying, any other questions? Maybe I have one, which is, and what's coming? I suppose a bit of AirGap. I wonder, you know.
Oh,
so-
AirGap. Yeah, I guess maybe AirGap would be a good thing to go into real quick. Let me find this tag. This is still kind of experimental at this stage, but there is a new concept in Rancher extensions that allows you to import a catalog image, which if you go into the extensions view and go to manage extension catalog, you can import a catalog image here. And when you go to install Rancher in an AirGap installation, you will get this image for free in a Rancher images.txt file. And this will be pushed to your private registry, and then you'll be able to pull it and import it into your Rancher instance, which this will then create kind of a local Helm repository, which will then serve up the Kubewarden UI, and then you'll be able to install it from there. So you don't have to talk to GitHub or anything. It'll just be strictly within your cluster.
Sounds good. Super nice. Okay. Okay, I suppose that finishes now, Jordan, your demo for today.
Yep. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks to you. Okay, any other topics that we would like to raise today? Anybody from the ones that have joined? Maybe we don't have anything else. Okay, we have seen Kubewarden 1.9, which is super nice. This is the community meeting. So we have seen how other people consume Kubewarden besides for example, in this case, Rancher with Jordan's UI. And as always, we look forward to your approach on using Kubewarden. How are you enjoying it? And please get in touch. We are super welcome, and you can see that we prioritize those community communications and community feature requests. So, yeah. Folks, guys, anything to add?
Thanks, Victor, for being an amazing host.
Thanks to you all. So then, see you around. Until the next time. Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
See you.
See you guys.
See you.
Bye.